Well, thank you very much for joining me. Today we've got Michelle J. Raymond, and she is from Australia, and she has a podcast. She has a business called
Company is called Good Trading Co. And then I also have podcasts. As you said, I've got a couple of books, lots to keep me off the streets.
Michelle. I wanted to just ask you, we'll start with this and just basically say, like, how did you really start with, tell us that part of the story?
I sure can. I'm a salesperson by trade, 20 odd years of selling B2B sales, and I absolutely love it. Best job in the world. But here in Australia, Nola, what happened was I worked in manufacturing my entire career. I'm obsessed with manufacturing. From my very first job, I walked into a factory and watched how something was made and was fascinated. And I've always worked as a technical account manager. But around 10 years ago, what started to happen was all of the manufacturing jobs in Australia started to disappear. They would either go overseas to cheaper labor or we got bought out. There was a lot of businesses buying each other. And so it became quite tough and job security became a thing. I got made redundant and I had to find a new job. And I thought I better find an industry that's got a bit more job security for me. And I had a look at this ad and it stood out because of the colors. And it said, come and sell chemicals into household and industrial applications. And I thought about it and I was like, it's mainly cleaning products. So everybody has to clean. That's not going away. This sounds like it's a pretty secure job to me. And I had a look at the company and it was way bigger and it had lots of employees in a couple of countries. I thought, yep, that's the job for me. I had no other experience that related to that industry, but I backed myself. I turn up at this job, they give me a customer list and they give me, and they say to me, off you go and sell. And I said, okay, what do we sell? And they said, Michelle, there's 10,000 ingredients. That's your job. Go and sell. And I was like, I don't know how good you think I am. As good as I am, there is no way I can deliver 10,000 ingredients, all the knowledge around that to 80 customers spread around Australia, which is the size of the US. And I said, it's just not going to happen. I got my job through LinkedIn and I realized that you could post content. I said to this new boss, do you mind if I post some content over here about what we do? And he's, what, where? And I was like, LinkedIn. And he said, does it cost anything? And I was like, nope. And he goes, I don't care, just go and sell. And I was like, okay. And off I went. I started to post content on LinkedIn because it was a way for me to scale my message effectively. Now, I'm not going to say that's what I had in mind at that time, but it was on some level, I thought I could do one post and I could reach many people. And then, as we know on LinkedIn, if you just keep talking, I sell this, it's pretty boring and monotonous and people switch off. Then I realized that you have to mix it up and create content that is of value to the other person, not just all about me. Then that I started to get good at that, but I realized if you don't have an audience, like what's the point? You're talking to yourself. And I learned how to build communities. And that was around 8 years ago. I've been doing it ever since in different capacities, sometimes as working for other people and some in different industries. And then ultimately I had to quit my job about 3 years ago, March 2020. COVID sounds familiar.
It
But
does.
I didn't have to quit because of a downturn. I was working for a cleaning company manufacturing hand sanitizer. It was the gold rush, is the only way I can describe it. I have never seen anything like it in my sales career. We just had hand sanitizer orders coming out of everywhere. I can't even describe it. I did a post at that time and said, hey, our company makes hand sanitizer. And I literally got $2 million worth of business from that post because a
Wow.
business that was watching that I'd formed these relationships over many years said, oh, I'm looking for that. I didn't know you were doing it. And then off I went. And that was great, except the boss that I was working for, Nola, this is what happens. He decides when I'm not there to call that company and say, oh, sorry, you have to pay double the price and you're only getting a tenth of your order in 2 days. And if you don't pay cash up front, you can't have your order. And sorry, it was all Michelle's fault. Now I found out off the customer. Guess what? I felt like I was having a heart attack. And so I quit on the spot, woke up the next day and went, I'm never working for anyone else. And that's the beginning of the Good Trading Co story. That's how my business started.
Wow. That
So
is, it's a really powerful story that speaks to the power of brand. I'm sorry that you had to go through that because that's not a lovely experience at all, but it really sets you up well to operate with integrity.
There's a
Now,
there's a reason that good is in my business name, because I want to do good business with good people, and it's driven me, and I'm really lucky that's driving me, because I'm now surrounded by amazing people like yourself, and that just makes me happy that I've now got that business that I dreamt about 3 years ago, and I get to help other businesses to build that. Happy news, happy ending, but the way it began, not so much fun.
no. Now, is that the company you've mentioned in the content before? That was, you had a company where you owned the majority of the business relationships. And when you
Yeah.
left, a lot of those people followed you. Was the
Uh,
company or is it a prior company?
Look, I've had that happen a few times,
Oh,
because when you build up a big community in a particular industry, especially most industries, when they're a niche one like chemicals, and I was selling all the ingredients that go into beauty products after that, skincare and hair care, all those things you can't pronounce on the back of a shampoo bottle, that's what I would do. And everybody knew everybody. And I would go, and I got headhunted to change jobs. And off I went. And I took my 5,000 followers built in that niche community, and they came with me. And then the same thing happened a couple of years later. I got poached by one of my customers because they wanted what I had. And it's happened a few times. And I didn't leave those jobs because I got approached because of I was visible on LinkedIn. I left them because I wasn't acknowledged for the work that I was being to. It had nothing to do with people approaching me. I've always had people approach me, but it was just the acknowledgement of my work wasn't happening, the reward for the extra effort that I was doing. I was like, what's the point in staying? And so it turned, like I said, it turns out good. But at the time, I was like, what's wrong with you people? Like, why don't you acknowledge and appreciate what I'm doing? And that's been the recurring theme over the last 10 years. I think as businesses got tighter with a lot of how they did things, it just became I was this square peg trying to fit in a round hole, and they didn't know what to do with me. And now I have my own business where I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff.
and you're helping other businesses do it right, so that they are going to be rewarding the people who are building that visibility in that community, right?
Look, when it comes to employee advocacy, which is what I help businesses do through LinkedIn training, is help them to get their employees visible. One of the first things that I start with is I need you to have something in place from the CEO or someone at that kind of level that acknowledges those that are putting themselves out there, because it is completely fearful for most people. The majority, even up to 95, 97, even 99% of people are petrified of putting themselves out there on LinkedIn. So if you have an employee that fits into that 1%, and you don't acknowledge the work that they're doing, like you are missing an opportunity to develop that person, but also you're missing out on what they could potentially generate for your business. And that is why I always start with acknowledgement. It does not have to be money. Quite often, it is just the process of someone in a senior position saying, thank you. I see it and I appreciate you. And that costs nothing. There's no excuses. It
Yeah.
is literally just someone taking a couple of minutes out of their day to say thank you. And that is the basis for any employee advocacy program.
Makes such a difference. Like, even if somebody high up just likes a post or even comments. I remember I wrote a post about my mom at one point, and the CEO made a comment. I was funny because he knew his account was managed, but
Yeah.
that particular comment, he had written it in all lowercase, and it just, he was Australian as well. And you could tell just from the vernacular that he had written it himself. And it was just like, you took the time to acknowledge a post that was personally meaningful to me, that didn't benefit the company at all. And it was like, oh, okay, this is why I do this.
Yeah.
Right?
And all of a sudden, that recognition encourages you to keep going, because
Yeah,
sometimes when you're starting out on places like LinkedIn as an employee, it can feel like no one's listening. Is this microphone on? Is anyone out there? I'm not getting as many likes as everyone else. But when someone internally that you respect acknowledges it, and like you said, supports it even, it just makes such a difference.
exactly. And it's easy to do because it all filters through the My Company page, right? Because if you've got your profile set up and it's all linked to the company, you can tell, like, there's probably a handful of employees who really are going to be brave enough to really be doing it. And you could really like just focus on those particular posts and like it. And it wouldn't take long at all.
And that's what I encourage anyone that's got a company page. I'm like, it's not just about the employees promoting the company, because there's a lot of talk on LinkedIn about employee advocacy, and that's great. But the brand or the company has a responsibility to also help advocate for the person. And the more that you do these things together, which is what I love, it's the synergy between those two that you get even better results. It's that old 1+1 = 3 kind of things. The brand through the company page can easily, as you said, the My Company tab, we've even got a brand new feed where it just shows you all the employees' posts. You don't have to go searching, you don't have to go looking. And there really is no excuse. And the more that you recognize it through the page and highlight the employee, what do you know? As my nan says, what goes around comes around. And that acknowledgement then creates this cycle of you saw me, you supported me, I'll support the company, and around we go. And when you build that momentum and you build the brand for the company and the employee, it's just magic. And that's exactly what I like to teach businesses rather than just say, build a LinkedIn profile, build a personal brand, and somehow it all happens by magic. Because we've always, I'm sure in your career as well, you've been through cases where you were great, but maybe the company you work for, that brand had been damaged in some way in the market. And it doesn't matter how good you are, you can't outplay that. And this is why both things are important.
Exactly. And I think not enough people are talking about that network effect, right? Because you're amplifying the people who follow the company page, but it's also the individual network that each employee pulls in. And if you've got like 1,000 employees and each have 500 followers, that network effect is just amplified, right? And you're right. I see a lot of people talking about how it benefits the company because you're saving in terms of like marketing costs, but there's not enough talk about why it's beneficial to the employees. And especially these days where employees are looking for recognition, they're looking for reasons to decide whether they stay or not. It's a really easy way to do it. But how else do you amplify that when you do training with companies? What else do you train companies to do in terms of developing their employees?
Look, I think the first part is to first of all ask which employees are interested in developing this space rather than this blanket one size fits all. Come on, everybody, we're all going onto LinkedIn, whether you like it or not, let's go. And it becomes like this force, and nobody likes to be told what to do. But if you can find volunteers, and then my next step is ask them what do they want? What's in it for them to potentially do this, which they're probably not getting paid to do. There's probably not a KPI in their goals that is aligned to this because most businesses that I come into have zero KPIs around anything to do with social. It's just this expectation. You work for the company, therefore you should do this. And so if you have a conversation and find out what's the driver for that person, sometimes it's a promotion, sometimes it's they want to be stand out in the industry, sometimes they might want to become a speaker, they might want to be on podcasts. Have a conversation and find out what is it that they want. It might be a pay rise, but if you don't have the conversation, you can't use the company and the pages to highlight and spotlight and drive them and help them to get in a particular direction. Because if you don't find out what's in it for them, here's what happens. Every day comes along and you get busy, and we're getting busier and busier as people do more with less. I think instead of pivot, when we were talking, when COVID came, I think more with less will be the theme this year. And from that perspective, what will happen is I'm busy, I don't have time. Okay, let's look at LinkedIn. Nobody's paying me, nobody's acknowledging me, and I don't have any KPIs. Where will I spend my time? Over here, where I do get acknowledged and paid and measured. And this is why it becomes really important to have those conversations up front and work out. It's easy to see what's in it for the company, but if you can support the employee, then they're going to be that advocate. But if you don't support them, and sometimes that's KPIs and acknowledgements, and as I said, but if you don't even know what's in it for them, then, they're basically going to give up within about 3 months max, is my humble experience.
And sometimes the policies surrounding social media use are punitive and scary. That famous line of up to and including termination
Uh,
that featured in the social media policy I was subject to. You have to have a certain amount of bravery to engage if you've got a policy that's covering you like that. In my particular case, what was in it for me was I worked for an American division. I was always based in Canada, but I worked for an American division. And I started trying to get a job in the Canadian market because I wanted to make sure that my experience was relevant. And I couldn't even get an interview with the Canadian division of my own company. never mind anybody else.
That's great.
I started writing on LinkedIn because I needed hiring managers to recognize that I worked for the company and I had relevant experience that I could understand because like I specialized in 401ks and 401ks don't exist in Canada and nobody understands what they are. They barely understand what RRSP, which is registered retirement savings plans are. It was an opportunity for me to write and highlight experience that they could understand. And I used a hackathon that I volunteered for. I became the face of Toronto and publicized that on LinkedIn and went around and did that on Yammer internally as well, and just basically used all my social media. And I also had applied for a job and contacted the hiring manager to say, I need you to watch me work, because a big portion of that particular job was around community and how to build like communications and engagement. And I'm like, I don't have the experience that you say you want, but I do have this, and I'm going to give you a live demo. And I did
Here it
that.
is.
It was fun.
Look, you can just see how the opportunities for me, even similar experience when I worked for one of these companies, they had 15,000 employees in, I don't remember, it was like 50 countries or something, spread all over the world.
Yeah.
And I knew that from my post here in Sydney, Australia, I was able to reach like the hierarchy at the top of the company in Europe, who by the time I went to my boss, their boss, that boss, there was probably 15 layers between us. But on LinkedIn, I could be visible to that person. And there were some opportunities that came up internationally within that business for me just by being visible. And this is why, as a salesperson, originally I got obsessed with it because I was always coming up against the gatekeepers, those people between me and whoever I wanted to reach. Normally, a really skilled receptionist that would block things off pretty quickly. But on LinkedIn, if you follow some general rules and etiquette, you can reach anyone you want in the world. And I don't think most people appreciate the opportunity that is, especially when everything we do is basically free, except for our time that we need to put into it. I couldn't reach my local, I used to be an account manager that looked after Unilever, for instance, 20 minutes from my office. The process that I had to go through to get in on site to go and see the people that I needed to was hard and took long. Conversely, when I jumped onto LinkedIn, I could get access to the head of Unilever's research and development in Europe or North America easily because I would just say, here's the value I bring. Here's what you can expect from my content. I'd really love to see the trends that are coming out of these places. Do you mind if we connect? Yep, no problems, Michelle. Here's what we're working on. And then I could come back and share that as content and then say, look, I'm ahead of the trends. I already know what's going on before you do because I'd made this worldwide community in the end because starting off locally and then it just kept expanding internationally. And I still am well known. A lot of my business comes out of that industry, which I haven't worked in for the best part of 3, nearly 4 years now. And I'm still known globally for that, even though I don't sell those ingredients, but from what I built. And that momentum has never left. And again, I think building community is something that is the most powerful thing that you can do on LinkedIn. Again, all under your own effort and energy, doesn't have a cost to set anything up. And it's just, if you keep building, that compounding over time is just invaluable.
And I had that experience as well too. Like that hackathon was global because it was an international insurance company, right? I had people in Singapore. What I noticed was I started getting followed by top papers in Australia because my CEO was Australian.
Handy.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. But I also remember like reaching out, people were attending Davos, and there was a question that I wanted to follow up. Somebody had asked a question about climate change. I was in Canada, Davos was Switzerland, and he was in South Africa. And I followed up with him and I'm like, did you ever get an answer? Because I'm really interested in the question that you asked. Right. But now I have this amazing connection for climate change questions about affecting the future of work. Right. And it all came through. Nobody ever got an answer from Davos, but we had a great connection.
Isn't it amazing that you can meet people at all kinds of levels on LinkedIn? That to me, people say, why do I spend much time on the platform? Yes, I'm trying to build my business and basically all of my business comes from LinkedIn, but the amount of knowledge that I can learn from the world's best experts for free for the content that they pull out is just incredible in any
Yeah.
kind of field in the world. Like it, again, I'm fascinated. I'm mind blown. I've been doing this for 8 years. It's not new to me. It's not like a new toy. But as it evolves and I've grown, then I realize the opportunity that it is for my business and for my personal growth as someone that now works at home by themselves for the most part. Most of my business is done online because, again, COVID business, which the opportunity is amazing. I've worked with people from about 17 countries far. But at the same time, I'm an extrovert that's used to being out on the road visiting customers, or I had a team of 30 people reporting to me. And then all of a sudden I was at home by myself in lockdowns in COVID. And I was like, I'm going to go crazy. But I've now got this amazing network that has become my colleagues as I look at them that support me. And people like yourself, I go, we're friends. I learn from you. And I've got people all around the world that I see like that now. And my workplace just happens to be spread all over the world. And that is something I didn't have in the beginning that I'm grateful, because the biggest risk in my business was not my knowledge, was not that I wasn't smart enough to execute and build the business. It was that the loneliness from working from home would bring me unstuck. And this is why I had to learn, how do you leverage LinkedIn to deal with that? Because I'd never worked remotely. That's not something that I was always on the road as an account manager, but there was always people around you. I was always face to face with somebody. And that was a huge shock to me. I'm not going to lie. Like, I went through a space where I was like, whoa, what have I done? This is horrendous. This is the worst place in the world for me to be, is home alone by myself. So I did get the cat. I got the COVID cat to keep me company,
That's
confession,
good.
but building community is also a much better idea.
That's good. Now that lockdowns are all done and whatnot, do you leave and go to like co-working spaces, or how is it being better lately?
It's really interesting. Most of my work comes from overseas. Very little of my work happens here in Australia. And that's something that I'm looking to more actively change. But what I've realized is there's probably part of me that's adapted to this new way of doing things. And I'm quite comfortable and happy to do it now. And I feel now when I have to go out to these social events, as much as I said, I'm extroverted. I love people. I love meeting new people. But when I go out now, I get this like almost level of anxiety of, oh my God, I'm going to see people. It's weird. What's going on? I've had to adjust the other way, which for someone like me was even more weird, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what is going on here? I love meeting new people. I'm the person that chats to you when you're at the groceries, picking up your groceries at the supermarket. I'm in line behind you going, oh, hi, how's your day? But these now, it's just changed much in my world. I tried some co working spaces and then it just became tricky to manage because I do much online. I couldn't take all my equipment all the time. And then I've just adapted, but I've grown and I've changed in that time as well. It's been really interesting to see as a person having this new workspace that I never imagined that I would be working at home mostly by myself, that it's now helped me to grow as a person just as much. But without a support network in the beginning, like I said, it was horrendous. I hated it. And I don't use that word lightly. I went to a place where I was like, I was going to throw away the whole business because I
Really?
couldn't cope with it. I was like, I'm driving myself crazy, because I didn't have customers coming out of everywhere when I first started, of
Yeah.
course. And I felt really alone, and it was winter and there was no social stuff going on because of the lockdowns, like I said. And it was not fun. I said to my partner, I said, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this business thing. I'm going to go and apply for these jobs because I'd been headhunted. And she was like, Michelle, whatever you do, I don't care as long as you're happy. And luckily they ghosted me. That was a story in itself. They told me, yep, job. And these were people who had been chasing me for 12 months. And then thank God they did, because I kept going. And as it has a happy ending, and I'm really grateful for where I am, but it didn't start that way.
No, that's interesting. What was the community that pulled you out of that? Like once, what was the community
Yes. I happened to get an invite on LinkedIn to this event, which was called Business in Heels Coffee Catch Up.
okay.
Now, of course, I laughed because I've never worn a pair of heels in my life and never will. I had to have a bit of a laugh at the title. That's probably what caught my attention. But it was a women's networking group that had set up this virtual coffees because of lockdowns. Now, I got invited by someone in the UK that I knew in the beauty industry, who invited me along to this event. I showed up on this Zoom and I got there, and The first person spoke and she had an Aussie accent. The next lady spoke and she had an Aussie accent. And the next one was like, where am I? I didn't even pay attention to the details. And then it turns out that this was set up out of Australia, and they just have these events that are on different time zones. People from around the world could join. And it turns out it was local. Now, I am grateful for that networking event because it was just an hour a week where I could come and have a chat to random business owners, women who were in all kinds of different businesses. No two were alike. And I just got to have that connection and community. And that made a difference because all of a sudden I had something to look forward to and I had some people that I could talk to. And that was a game changer for me. And then after that, I started to build up other communities through like Clubhouse. I was pretty active on that. I met a lot of friends through that over the world. And then that started to build communities around those events. And that it snowballed after that. But I would say that first 6 months, like, hardest thing I've ever done. Proud that I got through it. But some days, I'm not going to lie, I was thinking, what have I done to myself? Why would I want to do this business by myself if this is what it feels like? And I don't think people realize that working from home is not all that it's cracked up to be for lots of people. I think we all wanted flexibility in our life because I was working stupid hours that I couldn't keep up with health, work, life, relationship. There was no room for all of it. And work always seemed to trump it. When you took everything away, I don't know how a lot of people handled it. I think all they wanted was flexibility, not to necessarily work from home all the time. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to see how people feel about it now. I think they're starting here in Australia. We're starting to see, look, we'll go to the office 2 or 3 days a week, but the other 2, we want to work from home to have that flexibility. We're definitely seeing that here.
And I think it's location flexibility, but it's more like the autonomy to choose what works for you and what works for the work. And that's honestly what I always was like, because I started working from home. I started advocating for it in 2011 and then gradually started 2012. We lost it in 2013 and then we built up. By 2018, I was 4 days a week at home. And then I had a massive car accident. Don't recommend it. After that, I wanted to work 100% remote and I managed to switch into a sales role. That's what I really liked.
I think it's the level of trust that someone has in you as well, that they don't need to follow your every movement to know that the job's being done. And for me, that's what it was all about. Trust me to get my job done. You're paying me. I've got the results on the board. You do not need to be all over me going, where are you? What are you doing? When are you coming here? All that kind of stuff. It was like, just look, here's my visit reports, or here's my sales numbers, or whatever you want to measure me by at that time. I'm doing the things that are generating results. How I get there, and this is where one of my bosses, originally when I started on LinkedIn, the first one, could not understand how I was generating business from my activities on LinkedIn. But the problem was the KPIs that were set were 30 customer visits per month. And
if it wasn't in person, it didn't happen.
Absolutely. And could not understand how I would see it that, hey, I'm generating all of this online. Here's all my opportunities. Here's the sample request. I could prove what was working. And then on the other hand, he's going, no, but you've got to do 30 customer visits. And I kept saying to him, but they're spread around Australia. Like, I cannot travel that much to see that many people. And it's a complete and utter waste of time when everything's working over the phone or Zoom, because the type of sales, that particular role was perfectly suited. It was just commodities. It was like, I sell this for this much. Is that the right price? Do you want to buy it? Yes, no. Okay, move on to the next one. It was not a, let's go have lunch, let's have a coffee. It was just whoever had the cheapest one, and you would win or lose based on that. But he just could not wrap his head around that there was this new way of doing things. And still to this day, they had such an opportunity. They could have been building this 8 years ago when I started working for them. Instead, what happened was I got up, I went to the next company, took my 5,000 followers all built around the industry and took it with me. And this is where building company brands through the company page and having followers became important to me, because I'd been the person that had all the employee advocacy. It was all on me. There was no one else. And I took it. And the company got left with nothing. Building your own company page and followers is part of an insurance policy for employers for when there's a lot of staff turnover, which whether that's from layoffs because the world's gone crazy, whether it's quiet quitting or whatever, all these fancy terms, the great resignation, all these terms that have been
The
thrown around.
rebranding for everything that's always happened in corporate, but now
I
the
know, right?
businesses are hitting all the
I'm just like,
corporate
I don't even know what all these things are, but I'm just like, okay, people change jobs or they get made redundant. But the fact is, the company still needs to make sure that's ticking over, regardless of which employees come in and go.
ones.
And this is the thing that people, when I first started on LinkedIn and I started looking at company pages, I was like, it's all well and good to talk about personal brands. I'd built my own, I loved it. But I was like, when I took it away from the company, there was a big hole that I left and there was nothing to fill it. And conversely, when I walk into a company that I'm proud of, that opens the doors with their brands, sometimes you could work for companies and it's almost like the door just opens because that's who you work for. And it becomes really easy to sell. And it works both ways. But I think businesses and a lot of LinkedIn trainers around the world are obsessed with you have to build a personal brand. And I'm like, most people are employees. They work for a company and have show up at the same place. Yes, a personal brand might be helpful, but it would be even more helpful for most of them to work for a really amazing gold star brands. And you can see that's why people want to work for Microsoft or Google or these kinds of businesses because they have that reputation. And people are like, oh, I want to work there. And this is what we need to start building, especially as the platform changes. We've now seen such volume at the new age group, which is going to dominate LinkedIn, 25 to 34. I think the stats are coming up to about 65% of the platform is that age group. You know, what they want and how they do things is going to change how LinkedIn changes. And we can see that with company pages where they've added some new features, for instance, about your workplace commitments. What kind of a company are you? What do you stand for? What things are in place that I, as an employee, are going to come and do my research and work out what kind of a company are you? Are you purpose driven and aligned with my own vision and my values? And if you don't, then I'm not going to work for you. I'm going to go over here to someone that does. And that's more important to that age group. And when we talk about the future of work, or for me, it's the future of LinkedIn and how it ties, you have to really look at what is happening with that age group because they're just going to be dominating just by pure numbers.
No, that's very important. What are your predictions other than that? I know Instagram came out the other day and said that they had pushed video too much. Do you think that video is going to go down, or is what's your prediction since you have a good track record in
Look,
predicting niches and
there's always this obsession with video, short form video, because it's popular on TikTok or YouTube shorts or reels or whatever. But I think ultimately you're successful on LinkedIn when you're able to create content that rotates through all the different formats. Now, from a LinkedIn perspective, in a B2B perspective, and how that plays out, all the research is all about for 2023 with the financial doom and gloom that will play out to various levels around the world. How do brands work around that? They build thought leadership. How do you build thought leadership? Through long form articles and long form videos. So I've always gone hard on newsletters and I've always gone hard on LinkedIn Lives or that particular style of company pages, particularly. Now, you can see LinkedIn just released an article just last week to show how much newsletters had grown, and we can see how many new features are coming to help promote newsletters. Now, that goes against the general consensus on the platform that most people don't have the attention span, they don't read them, they do when they're valuable. And I think original thought leadership that really speaks to companies should have access to more resources and thought leadership than an individual. But when you bring that together and package it in a way for the audience, and again, the word original, I'm going to keep saying that because there's nothing worse than jumping onto Google, looking for an answer because you want to buy something. You go to 10 different websites and they all have the same answer because it's been written for SEO and it's just a copy of a copy. One step away from plagiarism, nothing original. And you can't go, does anyone disagree with this? There has to be somebody that disagrees. And that objectiveness will be really important. Long form thought leadership, original thoughts is one part, and newsletters and LinkedIn Lives are where that plays out. The next thing that you need to keep in mind on LinkedIn is how do you build community? And we're seeing a bit of a renaissance for groups. We're starting to see a few new features come through for that. And I'm not saying that they don't have a long way to go. They absolutely do. But everything that LinkedIn's talking about will be built around communities. How do communities have conversations? And that's the same with brands as well. They want brands involved in conversations, and things like with product pages, you can have a group attached to them. You can
Oh,
hear
really?
what
Okay.
you can hear what your users are saying about your products and build a community. A good example of that is the Canva product page also has a
Yeah.
group, and you can
Oh,
see all the way that people use Canva, for instance, which has obviously been such a big part of our lives over the last few years. And again, how do brands engage with their community and having more tools around that? And again, LinkedIn Lives are how you can have a conversation and build a community. And they're the things that I've always gone really hard on, much against a lot of what's out there. I'm not a short form video is the answer kind of person. I think it has its place, but I don't think it's the be all end all of what people think it is on LinkedIn. It might be, of course, it's different on other platforms, but on LinkedIn, I just don't see that playing out. I think it's start to use your brains, start to just not be the same. It's time to be different.
and I like for newsletters, in fact, you can take, even if you do like a series of short form videos, you can embed that into a longer newsletter and use it
Yeah,
strategically, right?
absolutely. It's the only place that you can build up subscribers to your content on LinkedIn. For my company page, especially, that we know that the content on company pages does not show in the home feed as much as personal content. The space,
Mhm.
we've got 900 million people on the platform now, a home feed that can't jam anything more into it until we get the new Discover feed, which will take some of that out and give you a different place to discover. Here's why this is why I'm backing myself on this. When you see the new screenshots for the what's called the Discover feed, here's what they have on there: videos, events, and newsletters. I just follow the hints from LinkedIn and say they're putting out blog articles about newsletters. They're saying about how much they've grown. They're saying Twitter doesn't have them or this doesn't have them. They're saying video, there's a whole video tab for discovery. And
Yeah.
this is the thing that we need to look at. LinkedIn, I back their research. They've got the B2B Institute. They do everything with Edelman Report, much research. And I go, how would me, as one individual here with zero experience in that space, have more research and knowledge than these people that were putting in I don't know how much money? Why not just trust their research? Because that's where the new features and functions will come to.
When is this Discover feed supposed to be coming through? Have you heard a
Yeah.
time?
So yeah, some people in North America already have it. I only have come across one person that has it in my travels. There's no timeline on when it goes further than that.
Mm.
Essentially, where you've got your home feed,
Yeah.
similar to, I guess, like on TikTok, maybe there's like a For You page. Think about it similar like that, but just with particular formats of content. Now, having two feeds I think, is just going to give us some breathing space to see some better content. And one of the hardest things has always been about how do you get a newsletter discovered. Now, as soon as you connect or follow someone now, you get an invite to say they've got a newsletter. Now it also shows sometimes when you search for people, it will show underneath and say, do you want to subscribe to their newsletter? There's all kinds of different ways. There's now on your profile, they're going to say all the newsletters you're subscribed to. Now, love or hate, that's coming.
Unsubscribe to 100 because for one, I've subscribed to too many and I wasn't reading all
Yep.
of them. But
Yep.
it's not that I care personally that they were public, but it's like I wanted it to look like it was curated because it forms an
Absolutely.
intention, an impression of the content that I pay attention to.
Yes, absolutely.
So
It's part
I
of your
think I've only
brand.
subscribed to about 30 odd now.
Look, and I found there was many when creator mode switched on, everybody got newsletters. Again, everybody flooded. And then all of a sudden it was like they gave up after the first one. It was like, okay, we did it. We had no strategy. We had no goal. We just did it. And then, oh, it's all too hard. Nobody reads them and they just drop them. And for me, it's about unsubscribing to those that aren't active.
That's how
For
I made my
me,
decision too.
For me, I still love doing them because they're indexed by Google and you can piggyback off LinkedIn's reputation on Google, which as an individual, I can't compete with that. It's a trusted platform, it's been around for 20 years. Being able to leverage their reputation for my business is just something I'd have to pay for it or else. I think it's just another huge opportunity why people should consider these things. But thing that involves community, personalization, getting involved, brands having conversations with their target audiences in a way that adds value, not all about them, me. That's what I think we'll see. And I think I'm speaking to Mark Schaefer on my podcast, and he's just released a book around brands and communities, which I've started to read. He's going hard on this space as well. So it was nice to see. I love the idea of community where we're headed, because this whole every man, woman for themselves is not my idea of fun. It'd be interesting to see.
I wanted to tie up something that I did a podcast on. I know somebody who specializes in alumni services. LinkedIn pages are not set up ideally for people who are alumni. For example, like if you are no longer have an email address or you don't work for the company, like the administrators can remove you or block your access to my company page, right?
Yep.
How would you like to see company pages set up to accommodate alumni services? Because it's a missed opportunity in terms of like referrals and community. Even though you don't work for that company anymore, it's not that you don't want to be part of that ecosystem, especially if you had a really great relationship and you're just leaving because there's a particular opportunity or you move or whatever reason that you leave.
Look,
Have
and I
you heard
think
anything about that? What would you like to see?
Look, I think there's a whole space around controlling who follows pages and having more say over that. At the moment, whether it's a fake account, it becomes like this huge effort to try and remove them. As a page administrator, it's not as simple as kicking someone out like you would do potentially in a group. You can't remove ex-employees that may not have left on good terms. I've got someone that, for instance, I block them personally on my personal account. I can't get them off my company page without going through this whole big thing with LinkedIn, which I gave up on in the end. And there's that side of it. But I think having control over who gets to see the content and who doesn't, I think as a company page administrator, you should have some say in that and be able to keep people there. The My Company tab is a little bit different because that's seen as a private intranet on LinkedIn for a company. And they're seeing like employee verification come through on that. You have to have an email address that matches the domain that they've got registered. And that's how you keep out people. It is the only place that's private. But for the most part, I think there's lots of still clunkiness around pages and managing them and using them how users use them, not just how LinkedIn's building it, which sometimes they can be way different. And that's the things that I like to have a say in, obviously post in different groups that I'm a member of to let them know, hey, as a page admin of a business page, this is really annoying. This is what would make a difference. And things like the inviting process is horrendous, which I'm hoping one day I'm hoping if I had a wish, that would be the first thing on my list is just that invite process is just wrong. It's just tedious. It's time wasting. And
I
for
wish it
me
was
personally,
bigger than first connections. Like you could invite your followers. And not only that, like personally, I have many followers from my previous company. Is can I filter that company out?
yes,
Because if I could block the connections that I have with that company, it's not that I want to remove everybody because, you know, as people change jobs, like I think that they could be very valuable to have as connections, right? But for inviting, it's if you're still having that on your profile, you're not my target client, right?
I hear you because I've got the same. I built the first
Yeah.
5,000 of my connections and friends are all related to the beauty and chemicals industry who are not interested in knowing about LinkedIn company pages for the most part. And I always get bombarded with them at the top of the list. And I just want to say, look, exclude this person. I have deliberately chosen that I don't want to invite them, just make them go off the list. The whole not being able to invite followers is very annoying, especially now creator mode makes you have a follow first button. For me personally, I found that really hard. I don't want to go through and connect with people, but I know they'd be interested in the page if I invited them. And the other thing is, with followers, you can't invite them to LinkedIn events. You can't invite them to LinkedIn audio rooms and LinkedIn lives, for instance. And there's lots of different ways that you can't use followers on the page. And you can't even, how crazy is this? You can't invite your company page followers to your company page LinkedIn audios or LinkedIn lives. It is crazy. You have to be a first degree connection of the page administrator to be able to invite them. There is no way that you can invite your page followers unless you're connected to them, which you, as a page admin, may or may not want to be, depending who's running the page. You could have a third party doing it for you. No problems with that, completely within the guidelines. For the pages I manage for my clients, I don't want to go and invite my connections to their event. I want their page followers to come to their event. So this is why it's a little bit crazy. I'm not going to say that pages have a long way to go. And realistically, they've only been getting some love from LinkedIn in the last 2 years since they've got record ad revenue coming in. I think we'll start to see even more come through, but it's just crazy, some of these little idiosyncrasies that we come across. But ultimately, they're investing in pages, they're investing in brands, getting involved in conversations. You've only got to have a look at how many ads on the platform are about B2B brilliance. It's the next 10 years are dedicated to B2B. We'll start to see that. It's really the hot topic that I think we'll see in the platform this year.
Perfect. You recently rebranded one of your podcasts and you've got a book about branding. So are there any tips that you feel that you really want to make sure that you're sharing that could set people up well for the next few years?
You can learn from my mistakes is probably what I'm best to share, because as I said, I came from 20 years in sales. Branding, marketing, I thought was a waste of time. And it was all the salesperson that was the hero. No surprises in that conversation to anyone that's ever worked in sales or marketing for that fact. What I realized, my brand, I call it like the Frankenstein brand when I first started, because it was, oh, I'll just pick this color. And the person who I decided my branding marketing was just getting some business cards done, and I let them pick fonts. I was like, I don't care, I'm paying you. I think there's a level of effort that if you do the work up front and do the work of who is your ideal audience, what do you want to be known for? And the more you can narrow those two things down, it pays off. Now, for me, the thing that has brought me unstuck is not asking for help early enough and assuming that I knew far more than what I did when it came to these other spaces, which weren't my expertise. But branding is powerful, hence why I wrote the LinkedIn branding book, to share all of those lessons. There's a companion workbook that goes with it, Nola, that I did myself over Christmas to get myself aligned with where I want to be for 2023, because I've grown, I've changed, my business has evolved and grown, and I wanted to make sure that reflected it. LinkedIn for B2B Growth is a name change for my podcast, just reflects where I want to go for the next year, 2 years. And it makes more sense because my podcast, I didn't come up with, there was no target audience. There was no goal in mind. There was no anything. It was just, I'll interview some people that I really have some good chats and let people know, because all I wanted to work out was how the tech worked. And I didn't have a goal for it. I just, then my goal was get a podcast set up. That's as simple as it was. And now I realize people were probably coming to my podcast expecting me to talk about company pages because that's what they know and love me for. And then they'd come on and I'd be like, I'd have a guest that was talking about time management, or I'd have a guest that was talking about money mindset. And they'd be like, am I in the right place? And so this is where I've grown as a person. It wasn't that they were bad conversations. It was that I just wasn't in alignment. And this is what I'm trying to resolve this year. Lessons learned along the way, but having that clarity is just been a godsend. And now my business is growing. I'm up 50% so far this year. I think it will double by the end of my financial year, which is in June. And because I'm clear, and that is the superpower on LinkedIn, being known for one thing, having your audience in mind, and just having that clarity it's just where the power comes from.
No, and I think we rebranded right at the same time, because
Yes.
I got feedback from people that they had no idea what the Janus Oasis meant. And I realized that Alexa thinks Janus should be pronounced Janus. There's like dispute about how you pronounce it. And I renamed it to be the Hybrid Remote Center of Excellence, which then helps me with my community too. And it's a lot more clear and intentional.
Yeah, exactly. People now know when they come to my podcast that they should expect things that are related to LinkedIn and B2B growth. And I can still have some conversations that aren't necessarily 100% LinkedIn, but it's tied into growth and B2B. And that helps with searches and things. But I'd never factored that in. I was just like, oh, good for business show, good works with the good trading code. That was about as much thought that went into it. And I think I don't beat myself up. I was completely thrown in the deep end a couple of years ago because I'd never intended to have a business set up. As I shared, it was like a blow up one night that I quit on the spot. And then the next day, I'm like, I'm not working for anyone else. And then off I went. And I'm learning along the way, but branding is just something that I wish I knew the power of earlier. And I know it now.
That's good. And podcasting is not as easy as it seems when you first start.
Oh
The
my God,
discovery
no.
is very interesting.
You think I'll have a guest and we'll have a chat and the guest will be fabulous and they'll help promote it. And then I'll be amazing and I'll know how to ask good questions. And then I realized that in the beginning, my questions were question and then waffle after it. The person was confused what the actual question was. There's lots of things that I've learned over time to refine that skill. But podcasting is a great opportunity to build a community. Again, it's another tool to build that original thought leadership. Really powerful when you have a goal and a plan. So if I can, anyone that's listening, that's where I would start.
My
Sounds
toxic
obvious.
trait is asking 4 questions at once.
It's easy to do. I don't judge you because it is easy to do. You ask it and then you go, I think I should explain it and maybe
Right.
rephrase it. And then you come back around. Certainly no judgment. It is a challenge and it's and a skill and something
Yeah.
that you learn. And it's only when you listen back that you go, oh, I didn't do good on that.
I spend most of my editing out myself.
Me too. I say a lot.
Yeah.
They're the little things that you start to listen for. But again, I think when we look at where we're going, what we're doing, things like being able to speak well on whether it's video or whether it's podcasts or audio rooms that we're seeing across the platform, being able to articulate your point of view is a skill that I think will become in more demand in the future. And the people that put the effort into learning that skill, I think there's a lot more opportunities that will come because it will distinguish you from everybody else that's probably got the same credentials, maybe the same years of experience. So what makes you stand out? And I think that will be it.
Yeah, I agree. And I had no idea how bad some people are about telling stories until I started podcasting and interviewing. And I was like, oh, I
And
thought
it's a
everybody could
skill.
do that. But I spent
No,
20 years on the phone.
and it doesn't happen overnight. And this is people look now. And as we were talking just before this show, like I've spent 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours a week for the last 12 to 18 months speaking on podcasts, speaking on LinkedIn Live, speaking in LinkedIn audio rooms. And I have put the work in to get to where I am now. Whereas if you go back to my earlier podcasts, anyway, we've got to start somewhere. But it's just, I look back and again, it's just, you have to focus on it and you have to learn how to get better at it. And this will help you distinguish yourself, as we said. And I think that's really important for your own brand. It's also important for the business to make sure that they support their employees to do this, because just saying to someone, oh, you're in charge of this department, go and host a LinkedIn Live and set them up for failure, that has disastrous consequences as well. It's up to businesses to support employees to really thrive in an online world that even if we're hybrid, some stage people have got to do things online. And why not invest in them that they can do it really well with confidence?
Yeah. And companies are actually doing internal podcasts to build up employee engagement and help with communications and just retention in general. And that, if it's internal and it's not necessarily public, that's a great way to practice with low stakes. Maybe you think it's higher stakes because it's internal, but the rest of the world's not hearing it.
Just invest in people, invest how to confidence on camera or how to speak or all of these kind of things just really are going to pay the business back tenfold. They're going to build this employee that is proud to work there, is happy that someone's investing in their future. That's the kind of employee that stays. And if you're looking to not have that turnover, just rate or go through the roof, then invest in people. I've never left a job where I felt like people were giving me stuff in return for what I was doing. That's not why people leave. They leave when they're not getting that. Just choose those people that are interested. I think that's the most important part. And then invest in them that they can be really good at crafting their skills.
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent thing to end on. Thank you much for making the time, Michelle.